3, 2, 1. All right, hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for Alexandria Riverfront Economic Framework Plan and the Alexandria River Walk. AIADC is so pleased to offer this course as part of Design DC 2020, and we'll get started shortly after I go over a few housekeeping items. First, by participating in this webinar, you are granting your permission to be recorded and for the recording to be distributed as AIADC and the Washington Architectural Foundation may choose. Second, we'll have time for Q&A after the lecture. Please type any questions you have into the chat box and the moderator will relay them to our panel after the lecture concludes. Now I'm pleased to introduce Michael Winstanley, AIA, AICP, founder and design director at Winstanley Architects and Planners. Michael, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you. Can you see my screen?
We can indeed.
Okay, great. As introduced, my name is Michael Winstanley. I'm the founder and design director of Winstanley Architects and Planners. We have offices both in Alexandria, Virginia and Miami, Florida. And this project is really an outgrowth of some just basic thinking that we have been doing over the years. Some of you might know that we were the authors of the Potomac River Transportation Framework Plan. And that was really a project about looking at the transportation opportunities up and down the Potomac and the Anacostia River. And during that time period, we learned of an economic multi-state regional economy that was occurring on the river. Working in the city of Alexandria, a lot of people in the city of Alexandria were watching other developments begin to grow and to begin to steal some of the tourism money that the city of Alexandria has really come to love. And so this project was really focused on trying to help the city of Alexandria think through how to make their waterfront not only beautiful, but also as an economic engine for the project. So I'm going to start with a short video that kind of begins to frame some of the thinking that we've had. I had asked the graphic designer that I was working with to give me something dramatic, but I didn't expect something cinematic. So bear with me a little bit or have a good laugh on the music. I'll be right back. Apparently the music isn't playing, so I'll just narrate for you. So as you know, up and down the river, there's a lot of developments throughout. There was the Washington Harbor that you just saw. The wharf, which has just opened, is obviously a big success of a waterfront venue. The Navy Yard has also been an area of new economic growth. And of course, just across the river from us is National Harbor and the casino. And all of these are candidly in association with the city of Alexandria. And you can see here that there is a regional economy being developed along the water, and transportation to and from these different waterfront sites is growing slowly, but that was really an interest in ours in terms of helping the city of Alexandria see what it is that they can have. So trying to get my slides to continue. So most of you know the city of Alexandria as Old Town Alexandria, and the city itself and the waterfront itself has probably a 400-year history of economic growth and diversity. And so what we thought we would do is start with just a really broad brush historic overview of Alexandria, but specifically we're going to stay focused along the water's edge and show how for years really the whole economic livelihood of the city of Alexandria was based on the river and its access to both transportation or other means. And so in the 1600s, there wasn't really a lot going on. Alexandria was actually discovered in 1608 by John Smith, and he came up from Jamestown and began to look at having a settlement. And at the time, farming, trading, tobacco, and real estate were really the economy that had existed at that time. And but Alexandria was on the river, and that's how it was discovered. And there were a lot of native inhabitants along the river at the time. It was both settlements as well as outposts for fishing and gaming. And so this was what Alexandria looked like in the whole Potomac area in the 1600s. And obviously it took a while to get established, but in the 1700s, tobacco, now really good farming, slave trading, of course, came in, but shipbuilding started to be one of the industries in commerce. And yet it took a while. The city in the 1700s, the city was founded in 1749. This is what the shoreline looked like at that time. You can see that the shore this is Union Street way up here, and today the waterfront is actually way down here. So you can see that the waterfront actually hadn't been filled out yet. And so it wasn't until about 1749 did they actually start beginning to fill in the waterfront. And I found this little advertisement when we were researching, and I found it quite interesting to see that even way back in the 1700s, there were ferries going from Georgetown, you can see George-Town, to Alexandria, Virginia, and you could either contact one wharf or the other to get your ride. And but that was, you know, I'm sure that the means of transportation up and down the river prior to this was oftentimes by boat or by water, but this was the first advertisement we found for actually commercial transportation means from Georgetown to Alexandria. And in 1798, you can see now that the edge of Alexandria has been filled out. This line down, this street way down here is the Strand, and that, as you know, is, or sorry, that's Union Street there, and the Strand actually comes in later. That kind of comes around here, but in 1798, this is what the city looked like, and you'll also notice the designation that the city of Alexandria, and specifically Old Town, at the time was included in the designation of the District of Columbia, and they took it all the way out to Jones Point. As all of you know, that later it was dissolved, and Alexandria actually never became part of the District of Columbia, but it was in fact targeted at one time. But it was the 1800s that the waterfront really took off in terms of economic engines, and shipbuilding, importing and exporting goods, and steamboat ferries really became prominent and prevalent in Alexandria. And Alexandria, frankly, became an international port from worldwide. You can see here is an image of the Fairfax, leaving for Rio de Janeiro in 1845, and look at all the other schooners that are now in 1845 coming up into Alexandria. You know, imagine the amounts of goods and people coming from all around the world. And you have to believe that Alexandria at this time was just a robust, bustling ship port, and warehouses along the edge, and commerce, you know, really a bustling area. And architecturally, A lot of people think of Alexandria and Old Town Alexandria as quaint little buildings along the waterfront. But the reality was that the waterfront had huge warehouses along the waterfront. All these ships were coming in. They couldn't offload everything, and disperse of it. They had to store it. And these are huge warehouses along the waterfront, some of which still exist, most of which are gone. But the scale of the waterfront is just much different than we see today or recognize today. So this really caught my eye that in 1861, 1,000 schooners arrived the previous year. That's over 3 schooners a day. 67 brigs and 225 steamboats visited Alexandria. And look at the scale of these ships. A ship of this scale coming into Alexandria today would be huge news. But imagine 3 a day, steamboats around the world coming and going. I mean, it was really bustling, and it was the place that Alexandria really got founded. And as all these goods started coming in, Alexandria realized that they had to rebuild their infrastructure. And some of you might know this tunnel that goes under the park or goes from the park and then lands up on Pitt Street, I believe it is. But they were laying rails. They had to get a railway to the waterfront. And in the late 1800s, they built all the infrastructure to start getting trains now to the waterfront. They had to get goods in there, and this was the best and fastest way. And you'll see why when you see the scale of the development. The government, of course, also saw Alexandria as a place that they could offload heavy equipment, military requirements. This is at Franklin Wharf, and you can see it's a real wharf. It's got a steam engine on this wharf. So they're bringing in heavy stuff. You have to believe that there's a heavy port, deep water port out here, and again in the water side here, you can see these large schooners. It was a very interesting and exciting area in Alexandria. And a panoramic view from 1865 to the right, you can see this is Duke Street. I can tell that because this is Prince Street over here. We know that because this was the location of the Old Dominion Boat Club, which our office actually designed and built. But you can see along here now, the whole edge of Alexandria is piers. And a lot of these areas, this was all filled in. This is now the Strand. You can see the Strand located here. This right about here is the approximate location, it'd be down in here, the approximate location of the new Indigo Hotel, which some of you might know, there were many ships discovered. So that's why the waterfront edge actually used to be way back here, but it's been consistently built out. And in fact, the waterfront edge is now, the boardwalk is now actually way out here. But again, a very lively and bustling waterfront. And transportation was nothing new for the city of Alexandria, people and things arriving by water. Look at the size of this ferry. Started in 1968, 500 passengers and 30 teams of horses. 70,000 trips over a 24-year life. That's pretty heavy infrastructure. And that's pretty, and that's, imagine this ferry coming into Alexandria every day, bringing, 500 passengers or even 3 horses off the ferry into the city of Alexandria. It would be newsworthy, but it wasn't newsworthy in 1968 and onward. It was common day experiences in the city of Alexandria. And they built ships along the waterfront. look at this guy up here, how tall this ship is along the Alexandria waterfront. It's maybe 10-story building. This was the, as you can read there, it was a four-masted schooner built on the river, 1883. Shipbuilding really took off big, and it was huge. Lots of jobs in the city of Alexandria. That big ferry that we just showed, this is where it landed from Georgetown. It landed at what was the location of the, most of us know is location of the Old Dominion Boat Club, now a beautiful park. But right ahead there you can see right up King Street, that soft slope taking you up King Street. But this is where the 30 teams of horses came off and the 500 passengers right up into King Street. And you can also see now, you know, pretty sizable buildings along the waterfront here. And this is City Hall back in here. You can see the steeple back here. And then in the 1900s, shipbuilding got very serious. They started building, they switched from wood to steel. The goods kept coming in and out, but now it's not from so much from overseas, but it's raw goods to handle to support the manufacturing that really found its way on in the 1900s along the river. Warehousing and logistics, of course, because they still had all the old warehouses, and some commercial passenger boats started arriving, but the tourism began to take over in the late 1900s, and you'll see that the waterfront really began to kind of lose its steam as an economic driver, because tourism was never really supported in a way that in a serious way. And I think that's really what we're driving to, which is that as the shipbuilding and the manufacturing have left, the city really needs to begin to look at what are the new economies, and the new economies on the river are candidly people, tourism, and food and beverage. In the 1900s, the waterfront foot of King Street, you can see here, there's that big ferry boat that we saw earlier on the river. Not a small vessel at all, probably a 4-story structure. Really a commuter boat. That's kind of ferry that you would see cars on these days, and that's really not something I think that the city of Alexandria is interested today, but it really was part of the lifeblood of the city. And to continue to talk about the big structures along the waterfront, you know, again, here's a man way down here, and this is, again, maybe a 10-story structure along the waterfront with these giant ships coming in. And even during that period, we laugh in the office, we call this the first Uber. It's a gentleman, Captain Wheatley, who advertised in the Alexandria Gazette for passengers sailing from King Street Wharf to Alexandria, and 1905. Sorry, I'm gonna just make an adjustment here. Along the warehouse, you can see, along the waterfront, you can see a series of warehouses, 100 blocks south of the Strand in 1910. Again, still ships along the edge in the early 1900s. You know, some very famous things. But as you see in this aerial image here, the Alexandria shipyards are now beginning to be formed down on Jones Point. Here's the lighthouse down here. That was the original location of the lighthouse. It has since been moved, as you know, but this was the corner of the sign where the DC would come through here. And the torpedo factory is up. Look how big that is. And that's in Old Town, Alexandria. But you can see down in here that we have a deep water port. And this is 1921. So the heavy industry is now starting to come in here. And these are individual slips for shipbuilding, which produced this image. In 1919, 7,000 workers on that site. That's more workers than Amazon is bringing to Northern Virginia. And it was in 1920 we had that many jobs in the city of Alexandria along the waterfront. And it wasn't just building wood ships, they were building heavy steel structures, and they had that, this is part of the shipyard. You know, these were very serious vessels that are being built. And when you have good transportation networks to certain areas, well, those who choose not to pay taxes are going to try to take advantage of that. And we found this fun photograph of bootleggers who got caught in perhaps in the middle of the night, it seems, kind of loading whiskey up. And another aerial view of Alexandria, you can see way down in here, here's a torpedo factory. We'll show you later this big plant, which is down at Robinson Terminal North. Here's the shipyard down here. And in later days, this would become the Ford manufacturing plant, which is now called Ford's Landing. Here are all the, you know, you can see now the piers from the heyday of Alexandria shipping that are starting to fade a little bit now. And this economy is moving from import, export to heavy manufacturing. This was a fertilizer plant. And then there was a power station built along this edge as well. But you could see the economy shifting. And then in 1932, the Ford plant, and for those architect buffs, you know, it was designed by Albert Kahn, you know, one of the great modernists of the period. I believe he was based out of Chicago, and he did a lot of large-scale manufacturing and facilities. And here's the building, and you can see how much glass there is. Really a modern warehouse, trying to use daylighting as much as it could. They had a ferry. They had to get people from one place to another. This is a little passenger ferry that was part of the whole plant. And you can see a large water tower to provide infrastructure to this plant, as well as the shipyard that you saw. Now, these were side by side in along the southern shores of Alexandria. Heavy infrastructure along the water's edge. Potomac River Generation Station, which is most likely the generating station that is being decommissioned now along the waterfront. And so this all coming around full circle to a different kind of waterfront, but still critically important to the city of Alexandria. Look at how many jobs must be here. Fertilizer and chemical facility in 1933, right along the water. It was on the water because they had access to deep water ports. Large vessels could come and go, carrying in raw supplies, carrying out you know, economic growth and a real economy happening. And here's a 9,400-ton cargo vessel. Okay, it's a big ship called Gunston Hall, which I thought was kind of nice after Gunston Hall down the river a little bit. But you know, really heavy infrastructure, creating a lot of opportunities and economic growth for the city of Alexandria. Probably best known in the city of Alexandria during the pre-war and post-war period was the torpedo factory. Now the city of Alexandria's art center and real art center that was designed in the late 80s as a really great way of bringing tourism and people to the city of Alexandria. A real success. We'll come back to the art center later, but you know, its original purpose was as a torpedo manufacturing facility, and they could get goods in, you know, raw materials in, and they could get the torpedoes out. And I want everybody to take note. This the skyline back here. Here's the edge of the water of what we know the torpedo factory to be today. But this building in the background actually was a much larger building. Now, really, the torpedo factory condominiums, but that was the scale that was once along the waterfront here. Really big stuff coming in and out of here. And here you can see now the torpedo factory. As it said somewhere, there was 11 facilities the Department of Navy had along the waterfront during the war. But now you can see at this period that the riverfront is changing again, and it has changed over, you know, these 400 years, and it keeps being remade, but it keeps being remade as this economic engine for the city. And then on a very important point after the war, and in 1946, I think everybody woke up and realized that this old town fabric was important and should be designated historic. And it was beginning of the historic preservation movement in the United States. And you can see that the first boundary adopted in 1946 was not the originally proposed boundary. Obviously, there were some people who did not want their properties included. As you all probably know, this obviously was changed later. But I think what's important about this is that this is a period of time, because of this legislation, it now freezes Alexandria historically. So buildings like the torpedo factory, just built in the kind of late 30s, are now frozen in time, and other structures that have disappeared are gone forever and can't be brought back. But this is a kind of a moment in time, a snapshot. And I think it's always important to understand that this frozen snapshot is part of a 400-year history, not part of a 80-year history. And I think that that's something that we've really sought to explore here. And in that period of time when things got frozen, here are some of the things that are going on the waterfront. The Washington Post had 2 large terminals, Robinson Terminal warehouses, north and south. This is south. And you can see, again, this is a very large vessel, and this is a fixed pier that is bringing in heavy goods, a lot of paper usually for the Washington Post and other goods, and they're being hauled off and stored in this warehouse. So this is what existed prior to the new development that you're going to see coming up. But other things started happening on the river as well, and probably were happening for a long time. But you can see here, we're back to some water transportation, but what I found very amusing about this one was that this ferry took people to, or they call them sports, as in good sports, I believe, from Georgetown and Alexandria to the several gambling barges that were along Virginia's shores for over 30 years. An economy that we couldn't find any record of, but we understand did exist. We couldn't find any photography of, but we understand could exist. But this is really the start of a movement into recreation along the water. You know, obviously the barges were located along the Virginia shores because of the jurisdictional aspects of having casinos and things like that. Um, but the waterfront itself started moving into more of a recreational mode, and you can see now here one of the old piers that is now completely decrepit. You know, remember the four-masted schooners coming in from Rio de Janeiro? Well, that was now replaced by the Alexandria Motor Boat Club. That looks like a little suburban track house that was with a bad mansard roof that was brought in and constructed. But these are now recreational facilities. And while, you know, there's obviously an economy to recreation, this is obviously changing and morphing. Although you can still see the riverboat coming up and down. I believe that did go up into Washington and did not, or Georgetown, and did not stop in Alexandria. But so the riverboat still exists in terms of transportation, but you know, the waterfront is really starting to morph a little bit. And here is the Beachcombers building that was one of the last surviving structures along the Alexandria riverfront that represented a move to recreation, including the Old Dominion Boat Club, which is down the river a little bit, or up the river, sorry. But you know, the city sought to save this as a cultural landmark, and was later turned into the Old Dominion Boat Club and renovated. And that's really where we want to stop the assessment of the city of Alexandria's waterfront historically, because since this period of time, it's just languished, and there hasn't been any good kind of connection to the city and development of the city. And while the waterfront is beautiful and fascinating, we believe it's underutilized, and that the waterfront plan that the city has implemented, we love. We think it's aesthetically and recreationally beautiful, but economically, we think that it could use a boost. So we went back and we looked at the 2014 City of Alexandria approved master plan. And the master plan was a 1 mile stretch of the city that the city wanted to pull together, and as part of pulling that waterfront plan together, it's going to change some of the zoning to allow for redevelopment of the wharfs, of the Robinson Terminal locations, and tried to put in place some zoning to allow for hotels and other types of opportunities. It was really an open space plan, and an open space plan which is beautiful and has the flood mitigation to prevent the nuisance flooding to protect the Old Town Alexandria. And we started our work by looking at that plan, which you can see here. And really, it's about a 1 mile section of Old Town Alexandria. And you may remember that I showed you that we think that the waterfront of Alexandria is really 4 miles long. And we will be focused on both the 4 mile, but also a larger 2 mile area. But this is the approved waterfront plan and I'll show you some more detail. And it did a lot of really good things, and it was in a lot of ways a huge success. One of the things it did, as one now comes down King Street, the Old Dominion Boat Club used to be located right here, and one of the concerns of the planners, the landscape planners who did the plan, which was Laurie Olin and Associates out of Philadelphia, as one came down from the city, from King Street, from the Metro, you got to the Strand point and you couldn't really see the marina, which was at that time, which is at this time, the main activity at the Alexandria waterfront, because the Old Dominion Boat Club was blocked the view. So as part of that plan, the city negotiated with the Old Dominion Boat Club. And today, the Old Dominion Boat Club was constructed and includes this structure, which is the old beachcomber structure. And you may remember that in the beachcomber photograph that it was originally built in the water, and that shoreline was way back here. And today the shoreline is out here. And one of the other things that this did allowed the city is to re-look at the waterfront edge along this edge here, which is where the city had actually come up with an edge that came all the way over to this area that was going to be for flood mitigation. It was going to bring the waterfront walk up to elevation 6 feet, which obviously is not FEMA flood elevation of 13, but it was felt that at 6 feet, they could stem nuisance flooding. Of course, the problem is that once the water is breached, these areas down in here are elevation 4 and 5 feet. And once the river breaches the 6 foot mark, it floods this entire area and is now trapped. And one of the things that the city is trying to really work through is how to pump this water back out into the city once the water recedes below the 6 foot mark. And complicating all of that is separating the sewers from the stormwater, which is really where the big cost of that whole project. That whole project, unfortunately, is skyrocketed, and I think there are a lot of people re-looking at it. But it is important, we believe, that the flood mitigation program in some form goes forward. But this was the original plan, and you can see that there was opportunities for the boat club to expand the marina. There was opportunities for the city to bring in, larger pieces of larger piers and some other ships. And there was a lot of other thinking going along here, but no real kind of connection to the larger world. It was like, okay, here's 1 mile of the waterfront, and we're going to, put some uses along this edge, but we're not quite sure how all of this is going to tie together to economic development, So we started with looking at that. But as I mentioned, it's our view that that the Alexandria waterfront has more opportunity than just this 1 mile stretch, which is what we just showed you, which was right here. That's the waterfront plan. It includes this park, it was this area right in here. I got that wrong, right in there. That's 1 mile, but there's stretches throughout here that we're going to end up showing you a very detailed project for 2 miles. And then in the end, we're going to talk to you about how we see Alexandria capitalizing on its 4 mile waterfront. And so this is really the core of the framework plan. You can see here that in that 4 mile stretch, there are highlights along the waterfront edge. Old Town obviously is in the middle, all the way down from Jones Point Lighthouse, which we saw all that heavy manufacturing area over there, and Jones Point now, which has both ball fields, but also, think of this, large surface parking lots. But it also goes all the way up to Dangerfield Island, where we have a little marina, a little restaurant, and which is directly across from the airport. And we'll talk about the airport and water transportation in a little bit. But critical for Alexandria, critical to our thinking, is that the city of Alexandria is going to take over this power plant site, which is, its names have changed, but this is a very large power plant that is being decommissioned. This is a coal yard. This is the plant itself. The transformers or the yard out here is going to stay, but there's a little development over here. But this is a new opportunity for the city of Alexandria. We're going to talk to you how we see that actually getting involved. And so we went back to the 2014 master plan, and we wanted to highlight the most important aspects of that plan and build off of that plan. We think that's a terrific plan. And so, but we wanted to expand its look. And so we said, okay, let's look at all the areas of open space. And the master plan itself really looked at these areas in here. And but you can see that Alexandria has these two very large areas of open space down in Jones Point and in Dangerfield Island here. And we want to preserve all these. We think these are, these are more rustic and natural, obviously, and these get more manicured as you get inside here. And as the smaller they get, the more manicured they get, but still very, very important in terms of civic life. But we now want to really start talking about economic energy and developing a series of commercial centers. And we look at these commercial centers as economic pockets and limiting these economic areas so that the waterfront doesn't become just a sprawl of buildings and a mass. We want these commercial centers to be dense, active, lively. We want the city and the commercial developers with city encouragement and bonuses to do cultural facilities in these areas. We want a lot of food and beverage. We want a lot heavy transportation. We want to get people to be able to come and go into these commercial centers, and they're obvious. Robinson Terminal South already being developed as a commercial center. Old Town, limping along, good ideas, but it needs a real boost. And there's some current activity in through the purchase of some of the buildings on the waterfront today, which gives me great hope that in fact this could be changing. Robinson Terminal North. This is an area that has been under a lot of speculation as of late, but you can see how critical this location is to the city of Alexandria. Canal Center, great opportunity, but just suffering from access, from not enough diversity in program. And then the Genome site, which is of fantastic opportunity. And look at the scale of this site. In these little circles, our intention is that these can be relative to the scale of what could happen here. And then Dangerfield Island, because of the little restaurant that exists out there. We see these as a necklace that exists. And linking these is, excuse me, linking these gives this plan strength. But in every good riverfront plan or waterfront plan, boating, both visually and from a recreation side, marinas are critically important. And so we'd like to see added into added into our necklace of opportunities here a series of new expansions of the waterfront edge in terms of marina development. Around Old Town, we have a lot of opportunities here that could be developed. Robinson Terminal has one. Canal Center, we're going to show you some stuff. And then the Genome site. The power plant site has a huge opportunity, but you can see that all of this is beginning to kind of, link itself together to this kind of mixed use waterfront filled with both passive recreation, active recreation. But now we got to connect all this stuff because the necklace is only so good because no one's going to walk 4 miles from up here to all the way down there just for a beer. So going back to all the things that we showed you earlier, that Alexandria has always been huge on water transportation and has kind of lost its way over the years. We brought back into it some thinking based on our Potomac River framework plan that we developed a few years earlier. And we want to link these commercial centers and with local water transportation. You can see up here the National Airport is up here. The National Airport is in fact considering a water transportation stop located at this location. They're still trying to work out some of the deals, the issues that go along with having a water transportation, including parking and access and stuff, and that's part of a whole other project presentation we're happy to make. But now we're linking these commercial centers through water transportation, and we're trying to bring people to Alexandria by boat without their car, and we're trying to bring them to these locations, and we're trying to make them all very accessible. So I can go to one, hop on a little ferry, go to another one, and if that ferry is going back and forth on a regular basis, then, you know, transportation along the water is terrific. And then, you know, water transportation also has a commuter component to it. And obviously one of the big concerns for everybody in Old Town Alexandria is if you have a commuter stop, it's going to draw a lot of cars. You saw the size of the ferry that used to come into the King Street area with the 30 teams of horses. Commuter ferries do have a lot of cars because you have to store the cars. And so our thinking is, okay, let's push any kind of commuter transportation of the city of Alexandria to the outer edges, to places that we do have parking. At Canal Center, there are something like 2,700 cars under cover in the parking structure there. We've had discussions with the developers there of their interest in terms of having parking, or at least having this happen. They would be very interested. And of course, down in Jones Point, we have a big open area. We could do surface parking if it was successful. There's a very easy area to put a parking garage. Owned and controlled by the National Park Service, obviously not an easy lift in terms of permitting and approvals, but still the place that we thought the commuter stop would be. And then you'll see how we connect these commuters. But we also want to extend the lines, as we say, of extension and connect our water transportation with the existing land-based transportation. And you know today that there is a trolley that runs from King Street Metro down to King Street back up to there. We'd like to see that trolley kind of come down, wrap around here, and then go all the way back up to Braddock Street Metro. Increase the number of cars, trolleys that the city has, have them keep going back, but let's get both transportation stops, metro stops connected to the waterfront. They come down, they hit key areas, have them keep going back and forth. But that didn't cover, as you saw, the entire waterfront. And so we thought, well, if you had parking way up top at Canal Center and you had parking down at Jones Point, why don't we just have a continuous trolley that runs back and forth that takes care of all the waterfront here? And so now I have transportation networks that are completely linked. On top of that, I now have parking locations all along this route here. So a lot of people don't understand that there are a lot of parking garages along Union Street. I'm an Alexandria resident. I have never yet not found a parking space in a garage. But now we've linked it all. We've got the two trolleys running and overlapping, stopping along the way, people hopping on. I've got the waterfront connected through these little ferries. I've got large, I'm connecting back across to National Harbor. I'm connecting up to all the wharf and all these other locations. So I've really now locked that in. And you know, one of the big concerns about people, again, in Old Town is their cars. And so, okay, if we had this network all set up and all this infrastructure set up, the cars coming from the north, we could reroute down into and encourage them to park in these locations here, and then take the trolley in or walk in. We'll show you something about that. And cars from the south, there actually is a pathway down along this edge here that we could get down in, thereby keeping all this incoming traffic out of the city of Old Town or out of the historic fabric, and keeping people off Washington Street, but diverting them down into the city of Alexandria, creating an economic engine down here. Remember, that's why we're going back here. We're trying to get everybody to start spending money down here on the waterfront and connecting to all those other waterfront areas. And so now I'm going to spin you through some more detail about how this actually could look in some detail in some of these enlargements. This is Robinson Terminal South. This is the approved plan. This is what's being developed. You can see townhouses up front here, a little bit of bigger building here, but right along here is larger buildings with some retail and food and beverage along the bottom. And this fixed pier is really starting to kind of come alive. And I think this is really pretty exciting. You know, here is the elevated roadway, waterfront walk to elevation 6 for flooding. This is now some food and beverage being brought in here. We've now got better activities. Here is the pier that is now being redeveloped. It looks very light in its activity right now, but some enterprising individuals, one named certainly Scott Shaw, the Alexandria Restaurant Partnership, is really looking to expand this in terms of getting some better food and beverage and other cultural activities out on this wharf. But you can see that we have access here. We can bring people into these locations, drop them off, and let them start walking along the edge. Here, of course, is the Old Dominion Boat Club as part of the whole waterfront area. And now some of these parks are really getting developed. But I want you to take note of this little piece here. This shows the transition between the new waterfront edge and the flood mitigation area of raising this to 6 feet. And then it drops back down, so all of these areas would still flood. But again, just showing the kind of vibrancy of the waterfront, really beginning to bring, you know, lots of people back down in this area. Of course, everybody knows King Street pretty well. And there's a lot of activity there, and it's getting better, but we have some ideas about how to boost it a little bit more. So the first, of course, is to do a water stop, but not a water stop that finds itself way out on the edge. Bring the water stop in closer. A couple of other things that we really like about the waterfront that we think could happen is, you may know there's 2 restaurants and 2 buildings located over here. They're 1-story structures. They could be 3-story structures. We could increase the density and increase the activity and increase all the activity or uses in this area. There's a building located right here, which is it's the Gateway building. It's asking for redevelopment. The owners want to redevelop it. They're trying to negotiate with the city over 6 parking spaces that face this project. So imagine getting off the water stop from Georgetown and walking down here and going, oh, that's nice, a parking lot right in front of the building. So we can do better. And the other area is that, you know, there's always been a lot of talk about King Street closures. And this 100 block, which actually should extend all the way down here, and we think it's a good idea. Bring the party out to the street. Program closures doesn't have to be every day, doesn't have to be all the time, could be at nights, on the weekends, let it be open during the day, but you know, could really begin to develop this as a commercial center. And then last is the torpedo factory. Once the real anchor, now just a little threadbare, needs a refresh dramatically. And we took a crack at taking a look at the ground floor, because that's what we think is really the best, that needs to be best. And one of the things that we think is, let's get a food court in here. You know, let's start thinking about Union Market, and then open up the street edge here. Let's see into this area, get some new vendors in here in terms of arts and crafts and kiosks. Take some of the galleries that look inward and have them look outward. And then in the parking garage across the street, steal the first row of spaces and put galleries along this edge as well. So Union Street itself becomes this kind of art street. Right now, when you look down North Union Street, it's just a parking garage on this side and a huge behemoth building with no penetrations on this side. But we can do better. Looked at in three-dimensional, the water stop as close in as possible, increasing the density along this area, street closures, make King Street, you know, the place to be. The Gateway building, you know, great opportunity for a new visitor center or something exciting. And then let's jumpstart, let's kind of refresh the torpedo factory. Robinson Terminal North, still undeveloped, looks like this right now with a big warehouse in the front and a huge pier that apparently just to restore this pier will take $5 million. And we're like, we got a better use for that pier. But we think we need a water stop. And then we think marina and active waterfront recreation would be fantastic. And in accordance with the waterfront plan, we think a 150-room hotel would be fantastic. But we also think there should be a banquet halls for weddings. I mean, and then put the residential in the back. This is what's been approved by the waterfront master plan, and we think it's a terrific idea. And we did some test fits for some developers over the years. And one of the things that we really wanted to do, we wanted to keep the Orinoco Street entrance open so that we could get the water stop in here, put a public, you know, bring down the right of way, but then let's get the trolley to kind of find its way around here. That way we give everybody to the access to the waterfront. Here we have a deep water port, so we still keep accessibility to for tall ships. And then we float in a barge for gambling or a restaurant. But we can bring in barges for more food and beverage. And now I've got a 50-slip marina, you know, restaurants along this edge here. And then we had another a group come in and say, hey, maybe this area here would be perfect for a new ship museum. And so these are the opportunities that exist at Robinson Terminal North. In this case, we modeled it after the South Street Seaport, where we had the big kind of ships here, and then we had all the kind of crafts that happened in the kind of active, you know, trades that you would have seen in the 1800s of barrel making and things like that. So we could really turn this into an interpretive area. And again, real important is we want to get that trolley coming around here on a brick paved area. Here is residential, another hotel, and then residential. And then over here is the 150-room hotel. But you can see that we believe that this is a perfect site for that kind of opportunity. And again, in 3 dimensions, you can see how this all plays out. And last is Canal Center. And Canal Center, we have been working with the developer at Canal Center over the years and exploring a whole lot of different opportunities. And I think while Canal Center had good intentions in the beginning, it has kind of fallen flat just because, in part because of its singularity of office use. But we think that there are enormous opportunities to create a new commercial center here. First, of course, again, is a water stop at the end of a important east-west throughfare for Alexandria. And then we have the opportunity to create marina activities as well. Change the all office use to residential. And we have actually worked with the developer to show them how to take their office buildings and turn them into residential floor plans. And then they have a huge plaza up top. Really turn it into an event space, food and beverage and retail. It's got all the opportunities similar to National Harbor, and it just needs to be developed a little bit further. So here's an example of taking 2 office buildings, turning them into residential buildings. These are the layouts that we had worked out. But then also, thanks to Street Sense that was hired, You can see here some ideas that Street Sense had about turning this into a really cool urban plaza. It had a lot of direct access down to the waterfront here and views out into different areas here that would really begin to make this a real center. And let's not forget, I got 2,700 parking spaces underneath this area here. And so I got a lot of opportunities to turn this into something pretty fun. And so that was really a kind of a series of explorations we did along the waterfront. And what was clear to us was that what was possible here was to create a river walk that many other cities had, that we could sell, we could market, we could attract people, we could get on TripAdvisor, talk about the Riverwalk. Some of the thinking came from a trip that I took with my family up to Newport once, and we did the cliff walk, and we parked at First Beach. We did the big walk, and lo and behold, there was a trolley waiting for us at the end of the walk and took us back. And so we kind of brought that whole idea back here, and interestingly, #1 on TripAdvisor for Newport. So we wanted to rethink that for Alexandria. And so we started with our big framework plan that we had just gone on, and we said, okay, let's see if there's a pathway along the water from these two parking areas that we had designated. And sure enough, there is today an active, accessible pathway that exists today along the Alexandria waterfront. But it's not marketed, and nor is it really controlled or supported or actively pursued. And we thought that was kind of a shame of an opportunity, because this is the marketing that you can do for a waterfront like that. And when we strip away these other diagrams, you can see that along this waterfront plan, I've got water stops, I've got parking, I've got a lot of transportation that's going to help me kind of support this whole thing. And bringing it back down to scale and adding some labels here, you can see that our thinking is that you start at Canal Center and you have this walkway that happens to be a 2-mile walkway. And yet, if I want a family of 4 with strollers to park their car here and walk their way down to Old Town, which is only a mile, I got to give them some sort of relief structures or some sort of support structures along the way. And as our work, as part of our work for the flood mitigation program, we were actually developing some pump buildings, which we turned into rest buildings and information booths as well. And so we looked at, we're bringing that into this project as well. But you can see now, you could park at either end. You could walk along, and we would have bathrooms and water and other facilities for you along the way. You could either do the whole 2-mile walk, take the ferry back, or you could take the trolley back. And so we developed the pavilions a little bit. And we started thinking about the language of the Alexandria waterfront and all the historical components that exist, and tried to change that into some sort of typology that we could apply. And we started looking at different materials and different ways materials could actually be expressed. And we looked at wood and stone, which had some really kind of maybe some seaport qualities to it. Of course, brick, city of Old Town Alexandria. City never met a brick they didn't like, we always say, which is not true. They're not into red brick anymore. But then just stone alone, we could really come up with some interesting ideas. And so we looked at all these different kinds of typologies and references, and we applied that. We went back to the original 2014 master plan, and we found that there was, in fact, some relationships that we could make between these, which was that these are the cultural themes for the waterfront that came from the 2000 master plan as part of a narrative of the history of the waterfront. There was a gateway south, and there was the Strand, which was called the working seaport. We had the torpedo factory area, which was called the witness to war. So we had this kind of more mechanized area. Founders Park had the theme of foundations, so we gave a pavilion that had a reference, and then Orinoco Bay transformations, and again, another gateway with a big arch. And so we applied that to these areas, and from all of this, we created what we thought could be an interesting marketing piece, which for the city of Alexandria, which they could use to attract people to the city of Alexandria, get them to park in these remote areas, use public transportation to access all these areas, and go to these commercial centers and spend all their money and generate economic development, which is what the city of Alexandria really, really wants along their river walk. And so and so this is in fact the outgrowth of that whole framework plan that we believe could actually help the city of Alexandria. And we've actually applied it to a much larger 4-mile stretch, which you'll remember we want to bring in the Genon site in the near future. And so we want to extend this stuff all the way up here. Maybe we keep all this infrastructure in place and we just extend another node up here. But you can see that we also could get that walkway, that river walk for the real hardy, all the way up to the front here, which would be a 4-mile walk from Dangerfield Island, where we again have a lot of parking. We could actually get a 4-mile walk all the way down, or any part of this. And so as any good plan, you got to sell it. And we think the Alexandria River Walk would be a very exciting path for everybody to take. And we are looking for ideas, and we're looking for places to share this with people. And so we've set up a website called the AlexandriaRiverWalk.com. It's a place where you can leave us your thoughts. It's a place you can plug in. It's a place that you'll get news about us trying to get more people to look at this. And we'd love your participation. So thank you very much. And I'm ready to accept questions.
All right, thank you so much, Michael. I can't wait to go back and visit Alexandria again when we have the chance. Before we jump into Q&A, I want to give everyone a quick reminder to join AIADC later today for more content, trivia, bingo, and prizes with our exhibitors and sponsors. Thank you so much.
Thank you.